The train brakes hissed, spitting steam across the platform. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She clutched the small bundle in her arms, her fingers pressing tight against the cold, hard circle of the ring hidden inside. This was it. The end of the long journey. The beginning of a new life. She believed with every fiber of her being that the man she had dreamed of, the man from the letters, would step down from that train and call her name. She had rehearsed it 1,000 times. His eyes would be gentle, his voice would be kind. He would take her bundle of worn clothes as if it were a chest of treasure, not a collection of rags, and she would no longer be the widow, the woman left behind. She would be a wife again, whole, sheltered, safe. The doors of the train car clanged open, boots thundered on the wooden steps, a river of people flowed onto the platform. Families embraced, men in dusty hats kissed their wives, children squealed with delight. But no hand reached for her. No voice broke through the happy chaos to claim her as promised. She stood straighter, forcing the trembling in her hands to still. He's just late, she told herself. His coat probably caught on the door. He's just a slow walker. But the crowd thinned. The platform emptied. And the truth, cold and sharp, pressed against her chest, harder than the ring clutched in her fist. Whispers started at the edge of the platform. A group of women drew close, their faces pinched with knowing smirks. One voice, sharp enough to cut through the lingering fog, reached her ears. Another fool chasing letters. The words stung. She tried to look past them, her eyes scanning desperately for a familiar face, any face that held kindness. But there were none. Only strangers, hurrying away, their arms linked with the people who had come for them. Her throat ached. Her lips moved in a silent prayer, but all she saw was the last boot step off the train. The conductor swung his lantern, the doors slammed shut, and the train began to pull away, leaving her alone in a drift of steam and laughter that was not for her. A tear slipped free before she could stop it. It fell onto the wooden bench beside her bundle, darkening the worn fabric that held her husband's ring, her last connection to the life that had been stolen from her. She bent her head quickly, as though hiding the tear could hide the shame. But more whispers followed, crueler now, sharper. Her chest clenched, her vision blurred. And that was when she felt it. A stillness at the far end of the platform, a presence that wasn't mocking. It was just watching. She lifted her gaze through the veil of steam and tears, and she saw him. He was a tall Lakota warrior, his shoulders broad, his eyes steady. He stood apart from the rest, his gaze fixed on her, not with pity, but with something harder, something certain. And though he had not yet moved, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, as if her story, the one she thought had just ended in humiliation, had actually just begun. "Did you hear? Her husband never came." The woman's voice rang across the thinning platform, loud enough for every ear to turn. The sting of it cut deeper than the cold steel of the tracks beneath her feet. Another woman chimed in, snickering as she adjusted her fine bonnet. Dreamed of a gentle man, she did. But no man, gentle or otherwise, wants to claim a burden. Laughter rippled from one end of the station to the other, sharp and cruel. She pressed her hand tighter over the bundle in her arms, feeling the outline of the ring within, as if it were burning her flesh. Her cheeks flamed. Her breath caught in her throat. But she refused to lower her head. Still, her eyes filled against her will, betraying her heart to those who feasted on humiliation. A small boy darted close, pointed at her tears, and shouted, "She's been left behind!" before being yanked away by his mother, who wore the same cruel smile. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the steam that still lingered from the train, to become smoke where no one could see her shame. But her legs felt rooted to the wooden planks as though nailed there by judgment itself. Her bundle shifted. The cloth slipped just enough to reveal the faint gleam of gold. Her pulse quickened. She pushed it deeper, terrified that the crowd would see the proof of her widowhood and turn her grief into another weapon against her. "Look at her, clutching that rag!" someone hissed. "As if it can turn a widow into a bride!" The laughter swelled again, hot and suffocating, until she could barely breathe. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, a silent prayer in the storm of their scorn. "Better to drown in silence than to let them strip me bare." When she opened them again, Her gaze swept toward the end of the platform. The Lakota warrior still stood there apart from the crowd, his arms folded loosely across his broad chest. His eyes were fixed on her with a steadiness that seemed to suck the sound from the air, silencing the mockery in her ears. For a single heartbeat, she felt a strange defiance rise within her, as if his silent presence lent her spine the strength her trembling hands denied. But the crowd pressed closer, their whispers turning to pointed words. One man, his face flushed and mean, called out with a sneer, "No husband, no home! Best send her back where she belongs!" The words struck her like a stone. Her knees weakened, yet she refused to fall. She gripped the bundle tighter, the ring pressed painfully into her palm, but it reminded her that she was still bound to something greater than their cruelty. Still, the platform roared with judgment, and a question twisted in her chest. How long could she endure before the shame crushed her completely? Her hands shook so fiercely around the bundle that she feared the worn fabric would tear and spill its contents. In that trembling, she felt the full weight of the ring pressing into her palm like a brand. It was a cruel reminder of the love she had lost, and the promise that had abandoned her on this very platform. The laughter around her dulled into a blur, the voices fading like echoes in a deep well. But inside her chest, a storm rose. Rage and sorrow clashed until she thought her ribs might crack from the pressure of holding it all in. She wanted to scream, to tell them that she had not asked for this, that her family had pushed her onto that train with false promises of safety, that she had dared to hope for gentleness only because the world had already taken so much from her. But the words tangled in her throat, too fragile to survive the hostile air. Her knees threatened to buckle. She pressed harder against the bundle, whispering to herself, "I will not break here. Not for them." But even as she said it, her vision blurred, her breath coming in ragged gasps, betraying the fact that she was breaking already. She dared to glance upward through the veil of tears and steam. Her eyes caught the figure at the edge of the platform, the Lakota warrior, still watching. His dark eyes were steady, his presence like a stone against the tide of their scorn. He shifted at last. He took one step forward, slow and deliberate. Her heart jolted at the sight, and she couldn't tell if it was fear or hope that struck her harder. The crowd noticed too. Their whispers cut sharp again, some mocking, others suddenly uneasy, as though his silence carried more weight than all their cruelty combined. She clutched the ring tighter, desperate to keep it hidden. If they saw it, they would say she was cursed, chained to a dead man, and unfit for a living one. Yet the warrior's gaze seemed to pierce through every barrier she had. He saw not the shame, but the truth beneath it. And that was more terrifying than their ridicule. "Don't come closer," she whispered to herself, though no sound carried past her lips. Part of her feared that if he reached her, the last wall she clung to, the fragile wall of her composure, would finally collapse. Still, another step sounded on the boards. Steady, unhurried. Her pulse thundered louder than the departing train. She could not flee. She could not fight. She could only stand there, trembling in the open, as his shadow lengthened across the platform, carrying with it an unbearable question. What would he say when the world had already said enough? Dust clung to the wooden boards of the station as the late afternoon sun dropped lower. The steam from the train had turned into a haze that seemed to trap every whisper, every sneer, until the air itself felt thick with judgment. Vendors leaned from their stalls to watch the scene. Children tugged at their mothers' skirts, asking why the woman still stood waiting when no man had claimed her. Groups of men loitered with their arms folded, their smirks carrying the weight of sentences already passed. She stood at the center of it all, clutching her bundle so tightly the cloth was damp with her sweat, her knuckles white. The ring inside bit into her palm, a punishment she could not escape. Every shift of a boot, every laugh that rose and died struck her chest like a hammer. She tried to stare at the ground, but her ears could not shut out the venom in their words. She thought she was worth a husband, one woman declared, her voice shrill and triumphant, but even a gentleman would rather ride on without her. Laughter followed, harsh and bright, and her shoulders curled, as though the sound itself was pressing her down. At the far end of the platform, the Lakota warrior remained, his stillness unnatural against the restless swarm.
His broad frame cast a shadow long enough to touch her in spirit, if not yet in body.
The townspeople glanced his way, their mutters shifting, some with scorn, some with unease. It was one thing to mock a widow. It was another to ignore the gaze of a man who bore no shame in his silence. She felt it too, the pull of his presence, as if his very watching lent her the strength to breathe. But the weight of the crowd broke that fragile gift with every new jeer. Her eyes blurred again, not with weakness, but with a rising fury. She had not asked for this trial. She had not begged for their eyes upon her. She had only obeyed her family and the promise of a letter that had turned to ash the moment the train door slammed shut. She wanted to run, to flee down the dusty road, but her feet would not move. She was chained by shame, and the fear that even if she ran, the whispers would follow her. Then, just as another cruel laugh rose from the crowd, the warrior stepped forward once more. The boards groaned under his weight, and the sound cut sharper than their words. The crowd fell briefly silent, turning to watch him, waiting to see if he would mock her too, or if he would break the circle that pressed closer with every passing moment. "You wait for a man who will never come." The warrior's voice carried across the hushed platform, deep and steady. Every word fell like iron into the silence that had swallowed the crowd. Her head snapped up. The tears on her face dried instantly at the sting of his intrusion. Fury sparked in her chest, even as fear tangled in her breath. "And who are you to tell me that?" she demanded, her voice cracking, but loud enough to echo against the station wall. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Some chuckled, others leaned closer, hungry for the spectacle. The warrior stepped nearer, his long strides unhurried, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Because I was there," he said, his voice rough with a memory she couldn't see. "The field where your husband fell. I stood among the men who fought that day." The words struck harder than all the crowd's cruelty combined. They shattered her balance. She stumbled back a step, clutching the bundle tighter, the ring cutting deeper into her palm until she thought the skin might break. "You lie," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the fragile thread of denial she was clinging to. "I saw him," the warrior continued, his voice unwavering. "Your husband died with courage. He shielded another man, and because of that act, I draw breath to stand here now. I owe him my life, and by that debt, I stand before you." The platform buzzed with whispers. Disbelief and scorn mixed with something else. A debt of honor was a language even the cruelest gossip understood. Her vision swam. Rage and grief clashed in her veins until she thought she might collapse. "So what then?" she spat, her words raw with pain. "You shame me with a truth the town already feasts on? You strip away the last dream I had and leave me with nothing?" His jaw tightened, but his voice softened, though it carried just as clearly across the platform. "No," he said, "I speak it because you deserve to know the truth. The man who was supposed to meet you today was not your husband. He was another man, a stranger arranged by your family. They lied to you. Your husband, Thomas, he never meant to abandon you. He was already gone." The crowd gasped. Some laughed cruelly, others shook their heads, but she felt as though the ground itself had been torn from under her feet. Her family had lied. She had been sent here under false pretenses, a piece to be moved on a board she didn't even know she was playing on. The bundle nearly slipped from her arms. She clutched it desperately, the ring burning hotter than fire. She wanted to scream that he was wrong, that her dream had not been a lie. But her voice broke into silence. And in that silence, the warrior stood, waiting, his presence offering no mockery, only the unbearable weight of a truth that had just changed everything. The bundle slipped from her grasp before she could steady it. The worn cloth spilled across the boards. A few simple shirts and a faded shawl tumbled into the dust, and with them, the ring rolled free. It flashed once in the fading sunlight before coming to a stop near the toe of the warrior's boot. Gasps rose from the crowd, sharp and eager, like wolves scenting blood. She dropped to her knees at once, scrambling to snatch it back, her fingers clawing through the dirt as if she could bury her shame before 100 pairs of eyes. But he bent faster. His large hand closed gently around the gold band. When he straightened, his dark eyes locked on hers, not with mockery, but with something far heavier. Her breath caught, her chest heaving. For a moment, she thought he might hold it aloft, parading her grief before the town. But instead, He kept it low in his palm, hidden from their hungry stares. "You still carry him," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear, yet every syllable seared into her. She shook her head violently, snatching the bundle back into her arms, her pride flaring hotter than the tears she could no longer contain. "It is all I have left," she hissed, the words raw as she clutched the cloth to her chest, as if it could keep her heart from spilling out. Around them, the whispers sharpened. One man laughed. A widow still chained to a corpse. Another muttered, "No wonder no one wanted her." The sound cut her deeper than the warrior's truth had. She turned her face away, shame burning across her skin. Yet he did not flinch or falter. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the distance until his shadow fell across her trembling form. He held out the ring, not thrusting it upon her, but offering it on his open palm. "This is not a chain," he said, his voice steady. "It is a memory, but memories should not strangle the living." Her eyes blurred, her breath ragged. She snatched the ring back with trembling hands, clutching it so tightly it cut into her flesh once more, desperate to protect it from both him and the world. "You don't understand," she whispered fiercely, though the strength in her voice wavered. He lowered his head, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the cruelest whispers. "I understand more than you know." He said it with such certainty, it was another blow. Her mind was reeling. Her family had lied, her husband was dead, and this stranger, this warrior, seemed to know all her secrets. She looked at the ring, then back at him. A new, terrifying thought took root. He hadn't just come here to deliver a message of truth. He had come here for a reason. The crowd shifted, uneasy now. She could not look at them. She could only look at the ring, pressed hard against her palm, and wonder if it would ever feel like love again, or if it had become something else entirely. Something dangerous. Her chest heaved so violently she thought her ribs might shatter. In the quiver of her breath, the truth slipped free, raw and jagged, carried not to the crowd, but to the warrior who stood too close to ignore. "Every time I laugh, I betray him," she whispered, clutching the ring so hard her nails dug crescents into her palm. The sting of flesh against gold blurred into the ache that had haunted her for months. Tears slid unchecked down her face, streaking the dust on her cheeks. She tried to bite them back, but the words kept spilling out. "Every breath without him feels like theft. And if I let go, if I smile, it means I've forgotten the man who gave me his name, his life, everything I was." The confession hung in the air, heavier than the steam that had once clouded the platform. For a moment she wished she could snatch it back, bury it in silence. But the warrior did not laugh. He did not sneer. His eyes darkened and his voice rumbled low, steady as stone. "No," he said, each word deliberate. "It means you have carried him as far as he can go, and now you must carry yourself." The simplicity of it struck her harder than the cruelest mockery, because it rang with a truth she had refused to see. The pain of it buckled her knees, and she sank onto the bench behind her, the bundle sliding to her feet. She pressed the ring to her forehead, sobbing once, a fierce, broken sound, before choking it away in shame. The crowd shifted uneasily. Their mutters thinned. Some averted their eyes, as though her rawness made them complicit in their own cruelty. Still, a few smirked, eager to see her collapse completely, but the warrior's presence held them at bay, his stillness heavier than steel. He lowered himself slightly, not close enough to touch, but enough that his shadow joined hers. In that shadow, she felt both threatened and strangely shielded. "Do you think he would want this?" the warrior asked softly, so low the crowd could not hear. "Do you think his love was given so it could become a weapon against you?" She bit her lip until it bled, shaking her head violently, but no words followed. The silence of her refusal became its own confession, and she hated him for drawing it out. She hated him because part of her believed he was right. Suddenly, a new thought, sharp and cold, cut through her grief. "Why?" she demanded, her head snapping up. "Why are you here? It's not just to pay a debt. What do you want?" The warrior's expression hardened. He glanced at the ring in her fist, then back at her face. His voice dropped even lower, a dangerous whisper. Your husband did more than save my life, he said. Before he died, he gave me a message, a warning, for you. He said the ring was not what it seemed. He said it was a key. A key? Her mind reeled. A key to what? The ring burned hot against her skin, heavier than iron. And she knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that it was no longer just a memory. It was a burden, and it was a threat. And the man standing before her was the only one who knew why. Evening light stretched long shadows across the station yard. The trickle of townspeople who had left were now returning, drawn by the scent of drama, as if gossip itself had rung a bell to summon them. The air thickened with murmurs. Boots scraped on the wooden boards, skirts brushed through the dust. The circle of eyes tightened until she felt trapped in a corral built not of rails, but of judgment. Children pointed. Their mothers pulled them close, but whispered behind their hands with lips that were far too eager. Men leaned against posts with smirks that carried the weight of verdicts already decided. She sat rigid on the bench, clutching the ring so fiercely her knuckles had turned white. Her body trembled, as if the wooden slats beneath her were the only thing holding her upright. Every breath she drew was stolen by the hiss of their voices. Left behind, unfit for a husband, cursed with grief. Each phrase was sharper than the last, until the words cut like knives she could not dodge. The warrior remained near, his arms folded, his gaze steady on the crowd. Though he did not speak, his presence bent the air, silencing some while hardening others. A woman at the front of the crowd sneered. What man would claim one who clings to the dead? Her words drew a fresh wave of cruel laughter, the sound ringing louder than the whistle of the train that had abandoned her hope. The widow's eyes stung, her vision clouding, but she refused to bow her head. Still, her shoulders curled inward, her body betraying the cracks that were spreading through her resolve. The warrior shifted, taking a step forward. He said nothing, but the crowd's mood turned uncertain. Some muttered that outsiders had no place in their judgment. Others fell silent beneath the weight of his stare. The tension grew unbearable. The air thrummed, as though the planks themselves would split beneath it. She felt her heart hammer against the ring in her palm, each beat crying for release. A boy's voice broke through the tension, high and cruel. She's not wanted by anyone! The words rang across the yard, and the laughter that followed swelled into a wave. The widow flinched, pressing the ring to her chest, whispering so softly it was nearly swallowed by the noise. Then why am I still here? The question tore through her, raw and unanswerable. For a breath, the crowd leaned closer, waiting to see if she would collapse completely, but the warrior's eyes never left her face, steady as stone, and she realized that the weight of choice now pressed heavier on her than the sting of their scorn. He had told her the ring was a key that her husband had died to protect. Suddenly their mockery seemed small, insignificant. This was no longer about her shame, it was about his legacy. I should cast it into the dirt and be done with it, she cried suddenly. Her voice, breaking through the circle of whispers like a lash, made every head turn. She lifted the ring high in her trembling hand, her arm quivering with the weight of what it meant. Gasps swept the yard. Women clutched their pearls, men muttered, children peered with wide eyes. It was one thing to see a widow shamed. It was another to watch her defy the memory of her dead. Her chest heaved, her eyes burned with fury. Her voice rose louder, trembling but fierce. If every laugh is a betrayal, if every breath is a theft, then I'll free myself of it now. Let them say I was faithless. Let them spit. I'll be finished with chains. She staggered a step toward the edge of the platform, her hand shaking, ready to hurl the ring into the dust where the trains passed, where the heavy wheels would grind it to nothing. Murmurs surged through the crowd. She's mad! She's cursed! She'll bring ruin on us all! The warrior moved then, his deep voice cutting clean through the clamor. And will you cast away what was given in love? Or will you honor it by living? His words froze her, her arms still raised, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. What do you know of love? She flung back at him, her voice ragged. You who stood on the field where he died. You who watched his blood fall and came to tell me only what I've lost. His jaw tightened, but his gaze did not waver. His voice steadied into a tone that silenced even the cruelest smirk. I know because I carry his life in mine. He chose to give it to shield me. If you throw that ring away, you throw away his gift. You say his sacrifice changed you, but I tell you it freed you. You live because he gave you the chance to finish what he started. Finish what he started? The words echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about grief. It was about a mission. Her knees buckled, the ring slipping slightly in her grasp. It caught the last glow of evening, as if the dying light itself demanded an answer. She sobbed once, a fierce and broken sound, her body trembling with the force of it. Then she drew her arm back again, torn between casting it away or pressing it to her heart forever. The crowd leaned forward, their breath held, hungry for an ending to her spectacle. And in that terrible stillness, she felt the warrior's eyes like a hand upon her, steady, waiting, giving her the unbearable gift of choice. Her breath tore from her chest in a ragged sob, the kind that emptied not just her lungs, but the weight she had carried for years. In that trembling exhale, she finally saw the ring. Not as a chain, but as a key. The last piece of him that had always pointed her forward, not back. Her hand shook as she lowered it slowly. She was no longer poised to cast it away. She was ready to place it in the only palm strong enough to carry it without letting it crush her. The crowd leaned closer, confusion rippling across their faces as she turned to the Lakota warrior, her tears streaking her face in the dim light, her arm outstretched. "If you owe him your life," she whispered, her voice breaking yet steady enough for all to hear, "then take this and carry mine as well." Gasps broke around the circle, some in outrage, some in awe. But she stepped forward and pressed the ring into his open hand, her fingers trembling against his skin. He closed his fist slowly, reverently. He was not a man claiming a possession, but one entrusted with something sacred. His eyes never left hers. "Then you are safe," he said quietly, his voice as firm as stone, yet as gentle as the breath of dawn. The crowd murmured, unsettled. Some turned away, their thirst for cruelty denied. Others watched in a silence they could not explain. She sagged then, not in weakness, but in release, as though the years of grief had finally loosened their grip. And when her lips parted, a sound slipped free that startled even her. A laugh, soft, broken, but real, spilling into the night like the first notes of a song long buried. The warrior's expression softened. For a fleeting moment she thought she saw her husband's courage reflected there, not as loss, but as continuity, life handed from one soul to another. She wiped her cheeks with the edge of her sleeve, standing taller than she had when the train first arrived. Her shame had been washed away in the act of giving, instead of clinging. The ring was no longer her burden, it was her bridge. The warrior turned to face the crowd, his presence alone silencing the last of their whispers. When his hand lowered, the ring hidden safe inside, the message was clear. Her story was no longer theirs to judge. She drew in a long, steady breath and felt the ground beneath her feet as if for the first time. She was no longer waiting for a gentle husband to claim her. She had chosen her own path, and it began with laughter in her chest and the strength of a stranger's vow beside her. If you enjoyed this story of courage, betrayal, and unexpected love, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You never know what secrets the next story will uncover.